Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have with me Caroline Biesalski. As you are soon to find out, she is from the eastern part of Texas, as you will determine from her accent, but she's graciously agreed to join us. So, Caroline, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for coming onto my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, could you tell us where you are today?
I'm in Germany right now.
All right, and that's your home, correct?
Yes,
So, we're here today to talk about sort of your journey and focusing on a chapter you wrote in a book called Circle of the One, Volume One. And of course, your podcast, Inspired Choice Podcast. So, let me ask you, you have a unique backstory that many of our listeners will relate to because you began as an accountant. And as from my background, many of the listeners to this podcast come out of accounting, they come out of finance, they come out of a corporate world, but you have become a podcast host and have, I think, a fabulous podcast. And you've done, I believe it's over 400 interviews in 9 months. So could you tell us about your journey into podcasting?
yes, thank you for asking. This is my favorite question. So I went from accounting to podcast host and coach as well. So you want to know about the beginning, of course. I How did this start? I studied economics and I thought I could do nothing else but accounting. It was a passion of mine. And then over the years, I found out that this is not what I want. This is not where I end in life. And there was someone asking me a question. What do you really want? And this was Bob Proctor 3 years ago. And I decided to become one of his consultants to learn for myself how it is to turn thinking into results and then teach others to do the same.
Your journey, I think you have at least characterized it as from silence to speaking. And so many people in the corporate world will be very familiar with that, but your journey is really from the heart. And so I wanted to maybe ask you to tell us about that part of your journey, moving from non-speaking when you were younger at school, university, and even as a professional into something different.
Yes, this is also why I chose the profession as an accountant because I could work in my cave. I always call it my cave. It's an office I built over the years. So I had an accounting company for 16 years with 6 employees as well. And we did very well also during the pandemic. It was all wonderful because accounting is always needed, right? But I was not speaking, and this is true. Not in school, not at university. I don't know how I did it, but I graduated, as you say. So I have my degrees, my MD, MBA, my double diploma, so to say. I studied in France. So languages were always my passion. But I avoided to speak because I was so shy. And of course, it was frustrating for me because I kept everything inside. I was not expressing myself at all, like for 45 years or so. And then 3 years ago, I found out I have to change that. It's not satisfying.
So why was it not satisfying to you? Did you have a message you wanted to get out? Were you just frustrated with yourself that you weren't sort of communicating your passion? What was the frustration you felt?
Yes, absolutely. I found out that I have a message and I have the right to speak. And if I have the right to do something, I have to do it because otherwise, for all the people out there that are not able to speak, everyone can express themselves, but I was not aware of that. I settled with, yeah, I'm not able, I'm not talented, I can only remain in silent. I have to, yeah, keep it for myself. But this is really selfish when you have messages and stories to tell and you keep them. Yeah. So the question was, I think, how this worked for me. So I just followed my inner voice. I opened up to the feminine part. I combined the numbers with the feminine, the intuitive part. And my intuition told me, now it's time, Caroline, for example, to start your own podcast. And I did.
That's really, I think, an important thing that it took many of us a long time to understand, which is that intuitive part can be as equally as important as the logic part. Whether you call it the logos, however you may choose to characterize it, but the ethos, the passion does have a home with a logical brain and even a person with a numbers brain. I'm a lawyer by professional background, so we focus on logic, but it's essentially mathematics. It's just logic. We call it logic, you call it numbers. Was there a specific turning point that opened you up? Did you have a crisis, or did you just have a revelation one day, "I want to say what I want to say"?
No, first of all, the pandemic came and I rearranged myself. So, first of all, at the age of 35, I started to study psychology on addition because I wanted to know how the mind works. And then came the pandemic and so it became all like silent. We stayed at home, this, and then you do other things. For example, thinking about what do you really want. And I had my first Zoom meeting and I was so afraid of that meeting people. And I even had a training against social phobia. It was offered by a great university here in Germany. It was like a research study. And I said yes, because I wanted to do something, just explore what does it mean. And it was with measuring as well physical things we experienced during the training. It was really helpful. And then, yeah, as I said, the turning point was I was exhausted. It was like a burnout because we didn't stop working during the pandemic as well. It was like never ending work. Maybe it was to distract ourselves from what was going on outside the cave, the accounting cave, because I had my office in my house, so I was never leaving my house. And it was like a burnout. And I said, I need a time out. It was exactly 3 years ago, and I booked a cruise. I booked a cruise for 5 weeks and I was on my own. It's like yes, and I went to this cruise and after when I came back, I was transformed. I knew what I wanted. I knew that I wanted to close my company and do something else. This was the turning point.
How did you translate that desire into action? Because people often ask me, "How do I start a podcast?" And my answer is always, "Get off your tail and start a podcast." But how did you make that transition, Caroline?
It's so easy. But yeah, when we tell this to people, just start, just start. And then they find excuses and advice not to start. But there is a burning desire. And we know this from Napoleon Hill's book, which I study every day, by the way, Think and Grow Rich, our business Bible. Of course, it's still valid. And we know this, you make a decision. It all starts with the decision. And the answer is always yes. You make a decision, the answer is yes. And the yes is to yourself. So what do you really want? And then you go for it. And it's the thing is the fun part. The fun. You have to have fun on the way.
You are the first and only person to talk about Napoleon Hill's book on any podcast I have ever done, and that's 5,000 podcasts. So let's take a minute to talk about that book because I'm a member of a C-suite organization of business executives. And to join, you have to commit to reading that book. It's not a new book. It didn't come out in 2023. It came out pre-pandemic, as we might say. So could you say a few words about the book and what that book has meant to you?
Yes. So Napoleon Hill's book is the book that Bob Proctor, my mentor, studied for over years. And I studied from Bob Proctor, as I said. And then when I studied that, then I wanted to know where does he has his knowledge from. And so I studied Think and Grow Rich. And it is still valid. You can use it. You can read 1 page per day, as I did. And then you take one idea and apply it to your life. So I invite every one, of course, of your listeners to my free book club every day. It is your, whatever it is, 6:30 Pacific time, by the way, if that helps. And yeah, this helps in 9:30 Eastern. But yeah, and I do this. I committed to do this 1 year because it has 365 pages. And I was, or I am a CEO too. My first company, the accounting company. And I studied thinking and results with all my employees. So this was a great experience as well. So you talk about the book. It was released 1937 after 25 years of research. Napoleon Hill he accepted a challenge by Andrew Carnegie, this person it was in New York. And you know what? I visited the library on Fifth Avenue where it took place last year in April. Yes, I did everything. I did. So there was the calling, do this, do that, my intuition. And I just jumped into the impulse. So this book was sold over 200 million times worldwide over the years, 90 years, of course. And it has to be something with that book. There's the spirit of all the people. So he interviewed 2,500 people who were not successful to find out the success principles. When you know what does not make you successful, you take the opposite and you can, or I don't know the word, you can extract the secret to be successful. And he interviewed, of course, also 500 very successful people. And then he condensed it into that book. So we can learn from that. This is what I do. This is the best thing you can do. And also what I do is I interview very successful people all over the world in my podcast. And I committed to 1,111 episodes. But I know I won't stop when it's done.
Let's go to exactly that. I pride myself on doing a lot of interviews, more than anyone else, till I met you. So you've done 409 months. How do you maintain such a rigorous schedule?
I think this comes from my accounting career with the structure and order. And we know order is heaven's first law. So it is possible. And I even accelerated it during the last 5 weeks, really, because so I had I don't know, it's just the commitment, just saying yes to the idea, accepting the energy of the idea that, yes, I, Caroline, am doing this now. This is what the energy the people, the listener need now to take their first step, whatever it is they want to achieve in their life. You focus from the goal. You have a goal. It is important to have a goal. You focus from the goal, from the person that's already achieved that goal, and you reverse engineer to now. So it all starts with the first episode. And your question was, how do I However, I commit and then I follow through. So the obstacle is the way. And so my luck was that nobody said no. There was only one person I asked, and I knew it before because we were not friends, but she was in my, let's say, address book. And I asked everyone. I invited everyone because I also want to be invited as a person. I love to be invited. So I invite everyone to be my guest. And it is fun having a conversation, 15 to 20 minutes, about what inspires you. Because I didn't have the answer to that question. You remember burnout and what am I going to do now? What is next? So I received the answers from my podcast guest, and I still do.
I think you answered this question, but I'm going to ask it in a different way to see your response. And I will preface it by saying I talk to everyone in legal and regulatory compliance, and it allows me to be able to see around corners. Now, it's not because I'm the smartest person that I have x ray vision, but because I talk to everyone, I can connect the dots and see things before other people do because I have a wider vision due to my podcast interviews. So I wanted to use that to maybe ask you, by interviewing so many people, what superpower has that given you?
That's a great question because I can tell you first what my superpower was. My all-time life superpower was my memory, and I got it tested. So it says that I remember 97% of the things I say, I hear, I write, and I read. It can be a blessing, it can be a curse. I would say, and I still remember every one of my guests, what they said, what they are, what is their expertise. For example, I know that this doesn't answer your question. So what superpower? The superpower is the speaking. I think because you see, I'm talking to you in English. It's not my mother language. And this is why I didn't do it. All the years I was like ashamed. If it's not perfect, then I don't start. But the message is it doesn't matter. If you don't care what other people think about you, because it's not your business, right? Then you just start to go for what you love. And this is my message. So my superpower is feel the fear and do it anyways.
Took me a long time to learn that, so I believe you. Let me move over to the corporate world because as many of my listeners are corporate compliance officers or other executives in the corporate world, many corporate executives in whatever their profession, whether in accounting, whether they're CPAs, whether they're internal audit, whether they're HR, whether they're IT, compliance, legal, it doesn't matter. They still have trouble balancing complex, high stakes communication. How do you help people find their true and authentic voice in the corporate world?
And true. And yes, it has to do with self image. Of course. So we already talked about this earlier when I talked about goals. You have to step into that energy of the person you want to become or you want to be. Just it's you feel it, you embody it, you wear the clothes. It starts with the clothes. So you ask yourself with everything you have in your life, would she wear it? Would she do it? It's about habits, it's about attitude. Napoleon Hill talks about attitude, pleasing personality. You can study this, by the way. Napoleon Hill, he's really great. He's great in teaching and he studied law, right? He was a professor for the law of success, by the way. The law of success just book series. I know it doesn't answer your question. So, what do I tell people? So, I encourage them to start to make a decision. And then I hold them accountable, which is also, there were people telling me, you cannot hold someone else accountable. They can only do this for themselves. So, I can be there, hold the space, and check in and help them that way to reflect also.
Now, let me ask you to focus on the listener or the person you may be engaging with. In the corporate compliance world, I often try to communicate your marketing to your customers. Who are the customers? They're your co employees. You're trying to communicate legal and regulatory compliance. You may be trying to communicate business ethics. You may be trying to communicate around culture. Well, what are some of the key elements, in your opinion, on building trust and rapport when communicating with others in the corporate world, Caroline?
Yeah. In the corporate world, I think there's no difference between the corporate world and being a human. So what you do is you meet the human being, right? We are all human beings. That means I think the best way to build trust is open your heart and speak from your heart to their heart. Because so we can focus on the other side. The other side is fake. You are not real. You are not authentic, right? And people feel that, they smell it. This is not what you want.
So, in the corporate world, many, and I will just use myself as an example. As a lawyer, I struggled for many years as to what was the purpose. In law school, we were taught lawyers can help change the world. There's some great examples of that. And then I immediately went and defended corporations. And perhaps that wasn't really saving the world. But much later in my professional career, I found a true passion in the corporate world that I could be a part of the fight against international bribery and corruption. How do you help? And that was my journey around my passion. So I found a passion in the corporate world. How do you help, or how do you suggest that those in the corporate world really find their true passion, even if it means working in a corporation?
How do they find it? Yes. Yes. So I do this exercise with all of my clients in the beginning when we started doing a shopping list. And the shopping list means you write down everything that you want for your life. And even if you don't know it, then you write down the opposite. What you don't want anymore? You become aware of what, so this is related to your question, even if you don't think it is. You write down, I want to work in corporate world, or I want to build my own business. So you choose. So the name of my podcast is Inspired Choice Today. And what choice do you make today? And you choose. So you have to be aware of that you have a choice, first of all. People think Many people think they don't have a choice. They have to work in corporate, or they have to whatever they do. But that's not true. You can make a decision today to change. Stories of change and success.
Caroline, I'm going to ask you to tell us what might be in your future. Is it more of the same? Is it growth? Is it new initiatives? Where do you see kind of Caroline down the road several years?
Thank you for my favorite question. It's always about growth. And one of the topics, let's say, on my goal card, because sure, I have a goal card that I carry with me, because if you do this, it must move into form. Of course, you have it in writing, your goal. And one of the things is to have my own, let's say, foundation. It's not the right word, but you know what I mean, charity and helping people to, it is in the education field, to teach people. I don't say I want to teach people Napoleon Hill. It would be, I'm doing it already, but to create events, for example, invite people. So the next step, I'm doing the podcast in virtually, in online. And then the next step is, of course, to step into the in-person events more, organize them, offer them, collect money, so to say, and realize projects to help more people.
Where can, or unfortunately, Caroline, we are near the end of our time for this episode. But before we leave, I wanted to ask you if our listeners wanted to connect with you, find out more about Inspired Choice or your podcast series or your online series around Napoleon Hill's book. On Napoleon Hill's book, first of all, you gave us a time of 6:30 Pacific. Is that AM or PM?
Oh, AM, sorry. I thought, yeah, it's in the
Okay.
morning. It's the morning master class with Napoleon Hill. Yes. Mhm.
Okay. So tell us how people can find out more about what you're doing or connect with you.
Yes. So my favorite platform for connections is LinkedIn. And you can find me in linkedin.com/Biesalski. It's my last name and it's easy. Not the name is easy, but to find me and click on the link in the show notes, of course. And the book study takes place on a platform called Be Connected. I found that 1 year ago and I love it very much because it's the world's first integrated video conferencing system. That means when you use the free video, your free virtual room, then the network is already there. You meet 27,000 people, and I have my book study every day. It's free. I invite you, all of your listeners. We read half an hour, and it's fun. Thank you so much.
So I'm going to go to your website while we're talking because I want to sign up for this. Is that how a listener would become a part of the book study? Simply going to your website and logging on or signing on somehow?
No, it's not on the website yet. It is on Be Connected. So the best way is to connect on LinkedIn, and then I will provide the link. Yeah.
Caroline, I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit me. This has been a fascinating exploration, and I have the distinct impression you and I are going to be visiting again.
Me too. And do I have a last thought to your listeners?
Sure.
Thank you. So just start, take the first step and trust the process.